Good morning, folks. Joining us from Germany are Ralf-Philippe Weinmann and Benedikt. Schmotzle? Did I get that right? No, Schmot. You say it, please, sir.
Schmotzle.
Schmotzle. Okay, all right. From Germany, and they're going to show us a fairly spectacular Tesla hack that has been languishing in the halls of disclosure. And on that, maybe I'll just get out of the way and let these folks educate and entertain. Also, yeah, so you guys, you have the hide control. I'll see you later.
I don't see the presentation now. Do you?
I do.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the talk that's called Tbone, Drone versus Tesla, from Ralf and myself. We will tell you later about why we named it one Tbone. So who are we? We are now two companies. So the first, Comsecuris, we are working on automotive projects since 2014. And while doing so, a common theme that always comes up is like, how do we tackle like our target devices? And we came to the conclusion that emulation is immensely helpful to do so. So we most of the time try to extract the firmware from our targets somehow and then put it in the emulation and then try to find the bugs there. And yeah, so because this is a common theme, Kunamon was founded in 2019 to like productize this approach a bit more and make like embedded automotive development and testing more easy. And as a side effect, this is also like very useful for security research. So yeah, back to 2019, like this announcement really caught our eye. So ZDI added Tesla as a target to the popular Pwn2Own contest. And yeah, so when we read about this, we take a look at the targets for Tesla, which should be on the next slide. Like, yeah, like you see, the Tesla has like a modem category, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, infotainment, gateway, autopilot, VCSec, and like the different prize money that they offered for successful hacks at the contest. So yeah, the public Tesla research up until this point, 2019, was most, at least to my awareness, was all coming from Tencent Keen Security Labs. The first publication they made was from 2016-17 called Freefall, where they had like a full chain exploit coming from a WebKit browser exploit all the way through CAN bus control. So when you do automotive security research, the CAN bus is like the golden thing that you want to hit. Like when you have CAN bus control, you basically can control all the things from the car. And Tencent continued from there. During the next year, like 2017-18, they published another white paper where they had like another exploit chain after Tesla fixed like a bunch of their first chain. And yeah, the third white paper about the autopilot that was published shortly after the contest, but we didn't have this as a reference when we tried to compete. So yeah, we Team Kunapon, that was our team for the contest. That was Ralf, myself, and Kevin Redon. And our contest strategy was we tried to attack the VCSec as a main target because no public research was published on the VCSec. And so we estimated it like there might be some low-hanging fruits there, and also the impact of the VCSec, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, is pretty severe. And as a backup, we thought like we should also work on the infotainment. So now I'm going to give you like a short overview of the VCSec. So the VCSec is a Tesla security module. For example, when you ever drove a Tesla, you get like this smart card thingy to open the car, and then also when you are inside the car, you place it in between the driver's seat and the passenger seat, and then you can like drive the car. And this works because the card is using NFC to talk to the VCSec. Then another option to drive the car are the so-called key fobs that are using Bluetooth LE to communicate with the VCSec. And the VCSec is directly connected to the CAN bus. So if you pop the VCSec, you can directly issue like controls to the CAN bus. The reachability from the infotainment is only allowed through the so-called gateway, which is a filtering component from Tesla. So this is a bit more restricted. So it makes actually sense to attack it directly. Yeah, so Kevin we bought like a VCSec from salvage parts to start our research. Kevin Redon took apart the salvage VCSec, and you can see that on the top side of the board, the main SoC is an SPC 560B46L3, which is a PowerPC running variable length encoding instructions. And on the bottom, you can see a second SoC for the Bluetooth side, which is a Texas Instruments CC2640. And that is an ARM M3 32-bit system. Also, you can see the NFC reader on the bottom side and the CAN transceiver chips that we identified. So in 2019, when we did this research, there were no mitigations, to our surprise, against memory corruptions at all. So if you pop like the Bluetooth stack or the PowerPC stack, there are no mitigations. So if you find like any bug there, like really basic memory corruption bug, it should have been like easy to exploit. And this encouraged us to like continue hitting the VCSec for the contest. The Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth SoC, the CC2640, talks to the PowerPC using a custom protocol that we reverse engineered during the contest. And then the PowerPC SoC is the one that issues the CAN bus commands after that. Yeah, we came up with the following approach. We used a JTAG on the VCSec to dump the firmware of both the Bluetooth side and the PowerPC side. And then we performed static analysis for both of these firmwares. And also we put the Bluetooth side and the PowerPC side into our emulator. And then in parallel, we also tried to work on the salvage part itself. But most of the we tried to fuzz the Bluetooth chip within our emulator, and most of this work was done there and not on the real chip. Yeah, Ralf developed some health issues before the contest, and this was making things a bit more complicated because Kevin and I were already like booked to fly to Vancouver, and then we had this time zone gap between our efforts because Ralf had to stay in Germany, and yeah, this cost us a lot of time.
And in the hospital, actually. So working from the hospital is no fun. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, in parallel, we started some infotainment research. Actually, we also had like a possibility, I think, for a WebKit bug that was like a leftover from another team competing at Pwn. At that time, the infotainment was like a normal Linux system running 4.14 kernel on an Atom Intel chip, so basically a normal desktop system. The kernel source and build root environment is publicly available on the GitHub from Tesla Motors, which you can find on the links from the slide. And one thing to mention is that Tesla really tries to use the least privilege approach for their user land. So each process running on the infotainment has its own user. Also, each process has syscall filtering enabled using the CAFL configurations, and also AppArmor is in place to restrict like further access to file system, everything. So we did some analysis there of initial vectors for the eyes, and yeah, of course the browser comes up. That was also like used by Tencent as an initial vector. At the time before the contest, the browser on the Tesla was WebKit based, and I think some days or weeks before the contest, a switch was made to Chrome. And I think for the first contest, both were still allowed for the contestants, but I think only Chrome gave you the car as a prize or whatever. Then we also identified Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as vectors. And yeah, there are like a bunch of services, for example, like Spotify, Daemon, and others that also parse data from the internet, but we didn't look at those at the time. One service that catched our eye was Conman. That's the connection management daemon. So the Conman project can be found on the URL from the slide, and it's a network connection manager similar to Network Manager that's used on Ubuntu platforms and others. And it supports a lot of protocols like DHCP, DNS. It has IPv4, IPv6 support, NTP support, you name it. And it's all written in plain C. And initially it was written by someone at Intel. And the thing that was making it the most viable for us is it's reachable from Wi-Fi. So it looks like an ideal target. So we spent some time to harness Conman DNS to make it fuzzable using AFL. So really standard security research tooling there. And to our surprise, like minutes later, it crashed during a 90s style memory stack smash. And yeah, when we looked at it, this bug, we first discarded it because stack cookies and all other like modern Linux mitigations are in place. And even while the service restarts, every time you crash it, like the randomization of 64-bit is like too strong to just brute force through it. So we thought at the time that VCSec might be the more viable target for us.
I think the actual entropy is 24 bits for the randomization, but yeah, still it's like you don't want to do 224 attempts.
Yeah. So yeah, in the end, yeah, we ran out of time, so we didn't enter the contest. But the results of our attempt are where we made the salvaged infotainment that we bought work. Also, the salvaged VCSec worked. So we had like control over those from JTAG. And yeah, we patched Ghidra to handle a PowerPC VLE. So in 2019, Ghidra was just released, and there were some bugs handling on the VLE side. Also, we emulated the Bluetooth chipset, the Bluetooth firmware from the VCSec for fuzzing. But yeah, we didn't find bugs in time. And yeah, but we found some bugs in common. And yeah, in the end, Team Fluoroacetate, Ahmad Kama and Richard Su popped the Tesla and using a Chrome RCE bug on the infotainment, which is, yeah. And that was the end of the story from our 2019 attempt.
Yes. Then Pwn to Own 2020 came around, and we initially didn't want to compete because we were still a bit hurt from the 2019 attempt, and because the security of the VCSec had dramatically improved after someone from our team had lunch with the Tesla people, or dinner, I think it was. So they found out what we were trying to attack then, and after that, the next firmware release had mitigations. So that was gone, that vector for us, or at least significantly harder, so we didn't try. So Team Kunepon in 2020 was just Benedikt and me. And this started at Offensive Con. So at some point we're like, wait, there was this crash or these crashes from Conman from last year. Let's have a look at those again. And after staring at the code for some bit, in the evening it became obvious that you can actually use the bug that was the underlying problem that was triggering the crash to not only do like a trivial stack smash, but like to jump over the stack cookie and also perform a partial write. So this means that using this bug, you can actually defeat both stack cookies and ASLR. So this was great. So this bug would have been viable alone to compromise the infotainment. But if you don't have an info leak, developing exploits for these kind of partial writes is possible, but it takes a significant amount of exploit development time. So I thought, well, let's spend some time to find an info leak. I mean, the code looks kind of crappy, so maybe like we can find something suitable to cut down our exploit development time. So next weekend, I had an info leak, a stack info leak in DHCP. So that actually gave us the necessary information to get both the base address of the libraries and of the stack. And from that point on, it was game over. So this was like a straightforward exploit at that point when you have both these components. So this is the basically the Stack Overflow, which is in the uncompress function of Conman. So this is basically the DNS reply parsing, and since DNS names can be compressed, so this means compression means that you can basically reference parts of the name that have been transmitted already. Henceforth, you have this kind of logic in all the DNS implementations. And funnily enough, I think in early 2021, there was a study by Shift Left, that's a company of Fabian Yamaguchi, where they used their tools to basically find these kind of vulnerabilities in lots of other DNS implementations that are used in embedded systems. So this is the link that describes these results. It's called NameRack. But yeah, basically, so I mean, we had found like basically the reason why I asked Benedikt to fuss this particular part was because in previous work that we had done at Comsecuris, in other implementations, we had found similar issues, and it's almost the same thing. It's like this study basically confirms this. The stack information leak is in the listener event function and in the send request function of the DHCP client implementation. So what happens here is you have a buffer that is allocated in listener event that then gets passed into this receive L2 packet. And basically, wait a second. What happens is that you iterate over the different parts of the DHCP packet, and you write in this buffer, and you read from this buffer, and basically have out of bound reads. And okay, sorry. Let me back up. This is not correct. So what we're looking at here is actually the DHCP server implementation. I think. Wait a second. I'm confused. Just a second. And we are actually looking at the. Why are we looking at V6? Sorry, I'm confused. 1 second. This has been almost a year ago.
I think the reason why it says DHCP v6 packet size is because they use the same logic for DHCP v4 and v6 in the listener event.
Yes.
But then the path continues on the IPv4 end.
Yes, but this is indeed the client code. Yes, this is the client code, and the thing is, how did it work again? So
I think it expected like for you to set a DHCP option, and when you didn't supply it, they
right. And basically, you end up reflecting parts of the stack frame, and because you have an out of bounds read, and henceforth, like the reply is containing data that helps you determine the base addresses. This is embarrassing.
Yeah. Also, you could shift the pointer via like different length. Was it like you could append some names, their DNS names?
Yeah.
And you could shift like a good control over the pointer.
This is what happens when you write an exploit, and then wait a year to give a talk. I'm sorry. Okay. How do you exploit these bugs with 0 clicks? So it turns out that the Teslas, at least the European Teslas, I've heard that this may not be the case for US Teslas, but I haven't seen anything in the firmware to indicate otherwise, connect to an SSID called Tesla service. And the firmware actually contains the pre-shared key credentials. And if you don't have the firmware, you can also obtain these credentials from Twitter if you know where to look. Now, the problem is that while we initially found this in the reply parsing, so this was not straightforward to trigger still. So we had to use WPAT to forward requests to a local conman DNS. So in the first step, we actually had to supply a DNS server over DHCP, and then basically echo things through itself to conman once more to make sure that we hit this code path, right? Then we used DHCP to leak stack information. This allowed us to determine the libc base address and the stack base, and also allows us to version fingerprint, so we can know exactly which version is running on a given card that associates with our AP. And henceforth, we can adjust addresses because, I mean, different versions will have different firmwares running. And henceforth, you need to adjust the addresses for the ROP chain that we use later on. And then you can trigger the bug to get remote code execution on the infotainment. Then we use a reverse TCP connection to fetch a second stage payload. And the pages containing this payload are then made executable, and the second stage is executed. So this is how we performed the attack. But as I told you before, we actually would not have needed the second bug, the info leak. So in theory, if you don't need this, you can it should have been possible to also execute this attack over the cellular network. So we still had a month of time until the contest, and we thought, okay, let's see how far we can take this. So we actually overshot the target. We didn't know this at the time. We only realized later. So the exploit ended up working against all Tesla models, so Model S, Model 3, Model X, and Model Y that have been produced post mid 2018. So how do you root the infotainment? So conman is running under its own user. All processes are restricted using CAFL. So this is a tool for syscall filtering, and UpArmor, which is basically a Mac framework in Linux that allows you to limit access to resources. So conman can launch binge sh, for instance, but it can mod probe with some restrictions, but only Tesla assigned modules are allowed. Some modules are loading firmware, for instance, the BCM DHD driver. So this is what we thought at the time. I'll say something about that at the end, because there was a slight mistake in our approach how we wanted to root. So the idea was to load a malicious Wi-Fi firmware to the SoC and attack the infotainment kernel from the Wi-Fi SoC side, because we had found a bug that allowed us to escalate from the Wi-Fi SoC to the infotainment. We first looked at whether we could perform an IOMMU attack. Whether we could perform a DMA attack, but this was not possible because there was an IOMMU in place. I think this was since I think early 2019, they started adding the IMU somewhat before the contest. But as I said, like the BCM DHT driver had some bugs in the past, and we continued there. So we had an out-of-bound B copy with a controlled length. So the problem here was actually there was one mistake in what we just had here on the slides. We overlooked that there was an app armor rule that prevented us from unloading the module, and henceforth we weren't able to load our own software with the bug that we had. So we actually only did this tried to do this escalation ping pong because we wanted to satisfy the rules of the contest, which said that if you have an initial vector that is Wi-Fi and then escalate to the and subsequently escalate to the infotainment, then it's a much higher payout than if you attack the infotainment directly. So this was stupid to us, but we just wanted to limbo through, and henceforth we want to do this escalation ping pong. In the end, we used like just a normal kernel bug. So we had zero-click RC on the infotainment, and we had found a possible way to escalate to root. This escalation to root was much later, however, so we sent off a report to Tesla that contained like the wrong strategy, and then we're told like this doesn't work, the escalation, and yeah, anyway. So, but what happened before is that before the contest happened, a couple of days before, the automotive category was canceled, and we, were sitting on this half-finished exploit. So we had at that point we had finished this initial vector. So we had like the RCE, and we had found the bugs that we thought would like escalate us to root, and we had written this up in a white paper, but we hadn't actually like tested the escalation on a real system, only in emulation. And there was a difference in emulation that caused us to think that this would work on a real system. Okay, so why does this talk contain drones? In like when we disclosed this to Tesla in October 2020, there was another public demonstration of an attack against the Model X. This had a pretty slick video, so we thought, well, I mean, maybe we can do better. Let's use a drone. So drones are fun. And actually, you can launch the attack very stealthily from like up to 100 meters above. So you could fly a drone to a supercharger or other spots with a high Tesla incidence rate, and just either like use it like attack the drone attack the Tesla from above with the drone if you have like a good antenna, or if you have like just a little dongle, you come down to the car and attack it from there. So yeah, that's Tbone. That's the first public Tesla zero-click attack. And yeah, as I said before, like between March and October, we were in kind of a limbo. So we had done this work, but the contest had been canceled, and well, we didn't know whether there would be other people finding these bugs. But on the other hand, I mean, the bugs had been in Conman since the beginning, and nobody had cared about them for 7 years. But on the other hand, again, there was no end to the pandemic in sight. So the question was like, will this happen again? And so in the end, like in October, we decided to submit the bugs to Tesla's bug bounty program. And this is where the fun started, because while Tesla fixed these bugs quickly and reported them upstream, they thought that the Intel PSIRT would be the appropriate place, because apparently that's where they get the base boards from, like where they built their infotainment system with, and also because it looks like the Conman project is somehow affiliated with Intel, because like the people who wrote it work there, and it just looks like it's with 01.org, so it looks like it's Intel, right? And at this point, we still thought like, well, not a lot of people are using Conman anyway, right? So, but this changed when we looked a little bit closer and found that Conman actually is the default in automotive-grade Linux, and it's also recommended by the Genevi project, which is like a reference platform for infotainment projects. For instance, that's used by Bosch, and Bosch again is used by many automotive manufacturers. So in January, it started becoming apparent that Intel had the Intel Previous IoT had just sat on the bugs for 3 months and hadn't done anything with them. And now they were claiming they were not actually responsible for this because it was not an Intel product and it was our problem to report to someone else. So that's when we started reaching out to automotive companies. I mean, we have some customers there, but like we don't know all of the automotive companies. So we wanted to like inform the wider industry, and that's basically that was my job in the last week of January. What became apparent after looking at Common a little bit more then was that you probably shouldn't be using Common in your projects, and we actually strongly suggest you to consider switching to an alternative if you can. Tesla has migrated to DNS mask. In my opinion, you should probably use something that is written in a memory safe language, but these things don't really exist yet. But this is something where, funding like some project or having your own implementation probably would help. But I mean, using things like conman is just asking for trouble and asking for memory corruptions. And then in March 2020, shortly after we had finished this disclosure work, it was announced that Pwn2Own 2021 would happen. So we were kind of annoyed that we had, wasted these bugs 3 or 4 months prior. But yeah, we decided to compete again, but this time we pulled out at the last minute for various reasons that we will explain in the next talk, right? Not here, that's for future talks. So our conclusion is that from the perspective of attackers, infotainment systems have become very, very similar to desktop systems. So in the automotive industry, you used to see like a lot of QNX systems, VxWorks systems, and other real-time operating systems and infotainment systems. And the majority has now switched to Linux. I mean, it has become so, I don't want to say bad, but it has become so similar that you actually find infotainment systems these days that have hypervisors. Like you can find an infotainment system that's running Zen with Linux on top. And yeah, so there's really a parallel to desktop systems. The most important conclusion is that stack overflows are still a problem in 2020 and probably still in 2021 as well, and that they're still exploitable despite mitigations. And for attackers, the takeaway from this talk should be that you really should try to understand the bugs and the code that is causing the crashes that you're looking at. And otherwise, you'll miss the real gems. Like if you're too lenient in your triage, and if you don't look carefully at the code, you'll miss a lot of really good things. And last but not least, we didn't actually say this in so many words, but all of the things that we did in 2020 on the ICE while we had this bench unit, we did an emulated version of the ICE because it was just easier. So actually virtualized. So it was running on a NUC, like an Intel NUC, in a modified version of QEMU. So that was easier than dealing with the physical hardware. While we had this in the office, for some time I was too stupid to connect the display properly. So that's how the emulated version started, the virtualized version. And after we had it, it was just easier dealing with this than with the actual hardware. And yeah, so we would like to thank the Tesla security team. We would like to thank the Tbone, which is the German CERT. And we'd like to thank Team Tbone 2021, which is, yeah, we're not going to disclose who was part of this. We will do that in a future talk. And Team Tbone, Tbone, was actually pulled in when we realized that the communication with Intel had broken down. So we needed another cert to help us basically negotiate with them and the vendors. Yeah. And now I'm going to show you a little a little movie that we did that shows you like what's possible using this exploit. We had some video where we showed like command lines and addresses as well, but this is just like the high level version now. So where is it? This is this. And how do I share this again? So I'm stopping sharing this, and I'm sharing this other window, which is this here. And this is earlier today. Do you see this? Is this visible for you or not? Okay, yeah. So
sorry,
this is earlier today.
Should be.
This is earlier today in the in the parking spot here, and this is a drone that is outfitted with a Wi-Fi dongle, and it's basically hovering above a Model X that I've downgraded to an older firmware, and sometimes it needs like up to 3 minutes, but in this time around I shot this video several times, so this time we're in luck, and we have popped the infotainment within a couple of seconds because we got the addresses right within the first try, and now we just send commands to open the Falcon Wing doors, and that's the presentation. And in the next couple of minutes, you'll see the same thing from the view of the drone. This is like this is the drone view. I think after that it's the ground view. But yeah, it's nothing spectacular. You can also like obviously you can do everything that you could do on the infotainment system. So you could change seat positions. You could change the volume of and the music that is playing. You could change the air conditioning and everything. You can open doors, but you can't drive the car, right? So yeah. But yeah, that's like for the future. That's the next project, which is called Zero to Donuts. So yeah. And then because we're good people, we close the doors again with the exploit because like you don't want to leave the doors open, right? But the thing is, like, you can also like we have like a really small dongle in this drone at the moment. But if you have like wait, do I have this here? No, if you use like the proper antenna, you can actually do this from, I think like I did it from 80 meters above, and like you really have like a good range, and like you could easily do an entire parking lot if you wanted to. Yeah, so that's it from our side. We're at 40 minutes, but yeah, I don't hear anything now. I think you're muted, Dragos.
Let's try that so you can actually hear me. Yay, it works. Thank you very much. If you can just turn off your presentation
I'll do that.
We can do this, and we'll see you folks in the next session.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.